Welcome back to Talking Europe. Well, this week saw leaders of the 28 member states of the European Union stay up all night looking at both possible changes in the UK's relationship with the Union and also the migrant situation. At dinner turned into a 6-hour debate on that issue. Austria announced that it wanted to put caps or limits on the number of asylum applications it accepts, and Italy warned Eastern countries that they needed to show more solidarity. Well, to tell us more about all of that, we're joined now by Italian Under-Secretary of State, Mr. Sandro Gozi. Mr. Gozi, thanks so much for your time and being with us.
Thank you.
Can I start with that? We had 6 hours of talks. What came out of it was this 2-page document. It is back and front, but really nothing really new. I mean, it's once again pledging to work together, once again pledging to move forward on plans. Is there any reason to believe that now we might actually see action?
Well, you touched the real point. It is clear that this summit, notably on migration, was a summit to discuss when, and for us should be yesterday, we start to implement our commitment and our agreement, and that is the key point. I mean, since October, if I'm not mistaken, Europeans are supposed to implement an agreement on migration, and the implementation is still too slow. We are doing our part with the hotspot, but the relocation mechanism is nowhere. And return policy, which should be run more and more by European Union itself, is not effective enough. We haven't started. We are doing return at national level. Italy, the country was done the most of the return in comparative terms in the recent months, but this also should be a European task. So this was to say, it is time for implementation.
But we still didn't put a date on it. There's talk of another migration summit with Turkey, because indeed in this conclusion we're being told that the joint action plan with Turkey is still very much the way forward for the European Union. Another summit with the Turkish Prime Minister, hopefully at the start of March. Are we going to wait again?
No, the Turkish EU plan is a key part of our strategy, because it is clear that you have to stop the flows at the origin, and at the moment, notably along the Balkans, the flows comes from Turkey, and we have certainly to foster our effort to ensure the full implementation of the EU-Turkey plan. That is a part of the story. The other part of the story is finally to start to implement the agreement that we reached, and that is still not being implemented. In March, we will have to put on the table not only the response to the emergency, but the proposal for a new European policy. That is going to be very complicated, but as complicated as necessary, because it is clear that we need to revise our common rules, and we need a new asylum policy. We need to build up a truly European common asylum system, and that will be the main issue in March. There is another point which is certainly positive, the fact that clearly by the end of the Dutch presidency semester, the leaders want to reach an agreement on the European police or European border police. Okay. And that certainly is something very important, and something that is fully consistent what Europe should do, because there is a problem here.
Because let's look at, given the Turkish situation first, as one element, the EU pledged to give 3 billion to Turkey in the bid of improving the situation there for refugees, most of them really from Syria. That money hasn't really been handed over yet. Italy was one of the countries that didn't want to pay in. They didn't think it was something national governments in the Union should go with. Now I believe you've started to pay into that, but are we actually once again seeing movement? When will things get rolling?
No, it wasn't a question of money. It was a question of rules and of coherence. We wanted to put it clear that the national contribution shouldn't be counted as a public debt in the light of the Stability and Growth Pact. And now we have received the confirmation, and we think that this should apply not only for the money spent to manage and stop the flows from Turkey, but also for the money already spent and that we are spending to manage the flows in the Mediterranean. That was the main point of Italy. It has never been in question not to help the Turks or not to cooperate with our European partners. We have been the country has done the most on migration, and for the most of the time on our own. And finally, Europe 1 year ago came on our position. Now we want to see those positions fully implemented.
And we're seeing some action from certain EU countries starting to go it alone. Austria announced that it wanted to put a limit on the number of asylum requests it receives, 80 per day. Shona Bhattacharya reports.
Beefing up its borders, Austria is introducing tough new measures to stem the flow of migrants. The Interior Minister says the country is struggling to cope.
Austria is one of the most heavily burdened countries inside the EU. It's clear we are not able to cope with these figures, so we have to set boundaries. We have to slow down step by step. The next step is we will define a daily quota.
Caps will be placed on both asylum claims and the number of migrants travelling through. Only 80 asylum applications will be accepted a day, and a maximum of 3,200 people will be allowed to cross the country. Slovenia, Austria's southern neighbour, has announced similar measures to prevent a backlog, leaving these refugees in limbo.
Now I wait to go to Germany, but somebody said you cannot, you must stay here, or you must go back to Syria, or I must go to prison. I don't want to go to Syria because everybody now in Syria have war.
Slovenia and Austria are on the Balkans migration route between Greece and Northern Europe. They're part of a host of EU countries unilaterally imposing border controls. After Europe saw over 1 million migrants and refugees arrive in 2015 alone.
So, Mr. Gozi, how do you react to that decision by Austria? Do you find it acceptable?
Well, we are concerned. We are concerned, certainly, on Austria. It is a common border between Italy and Austria, but we are much more concerned about the general European situation. We think that Schengen means freedom. Schengen means Erasmus for the young people. And to renounce to our freedom, we don't see how to renounce to our freedom can really increase our security when the security problems do not come from the freedom of circulation. So certainly we want to preserve Schengen, and certainly we want everything we can not to renounce to Schengen, but to enhance Schengen, to strengthen Schengen. And this is why we are so keen in the European Border Police, and we are also keen on strengthening our cooperation between countries and between police.
So how do you react then? Because Greece has also been put under pressure about its borders, pretty much being accused of not doing enough to secure them. It's got till mid-May to prove to the other member states of the European Union that they are secure. Do you think it's unfair, the amount of pressure being put on Greece?
It is very high, the amount of pressure put on Greece, but it is very high the number of refugees and very high the emergency that we are dealing with. We are convinced that when a country is in difficulty, you have to show solidarity. You don't have to point it out.
Kicking out of Schengen, for you, it's not an option.
When you have a problem as a member state, you have to do your best, but you need also to receive solidarity. Europe doesn't work if it thinks that kicking out a country is a solution.
And indeed, on the migrant situation, I don't know if we've seen much solidarity across the European Union. Italy, as you were saying, one of the countries that really had to deal with that influx of people. What are the numbers of arrivals like at the current stage?
Well, at the current stage are low compared to the average, because you know that through the Mediterranean it is with a good season. So I mean it is mainly between spring and mid-autumn. But certainly with open crisis in Syria, with the Libyan issue, there will be a further increase in the flow in the Mediterranean, and this is why we insist so much to go fast in the development of truly common policies, because it is clear that national solutions are useless.
And we heard there from your Prime Minister, Matteo Renzi, really looking at Eastern countries in Europe, saying that they needed to do more, they needed to be more solidarity, or Western countries in Europe, he said, would start to be less solidarity with the handout of money. Is that a threat that already has support of other countries? Is it a real threat to the Eastern countries?
But, we have reached agreement. We have voted agreement. We are all bound by agreement. A part of this agreement is the relocation mechanism,
which a lot of countries haven't accepted. Hungary, Slovakia.
Every country must accept it, because we are in a system where you vote in a democratic way, and when the vote is taken, you have to comply with the decision. Solidarity in Europe is not a one-way street. It is two-way street. It's not that you invoke solidarity when it matters of regional development funds, and then you forget solidarity when it is a matter of migration and asylum. Also because solidarity is not only a fundamental value, it's not only a very nice word, it is a legally binding principle. And it is a legally binding principle also on migration and policy according to our treaty. Then the fact is, if this Europe, does this Europe correspond to what we wrote in the treaty or not? This is why we are so adamant in pushing Europe to change, because we have the impression that what is written in the Treaty of Lisbon is not exactly what is happening in Europe today.
Well, indeed, one European Union country has been trying to change at least its relationship with the EU. It's the UK. We've seen them pushing for their reforms. How do you feel about that? Is there something strange about one country wanting special treatment in a way?
Well, UK has always got a special status in the EU. They are out of the euro, they are out of Schengen, they have several, as we say, opting out, opting in on home affairs, justice, police cooperation. Now we have to work on an objective which is an objective of common interest. I do believe, we are convinced that the EU has a strong interest in having UK in the Union. I'm convinced that UK has a strong interest in remaining in the Union. So I would say that this negotiation must be a win-win negotiation, and we are doing all our effort to prepare a starting basis, because this agreement for the UK government and for Cameron is a starting basis for a campaign which I believe that it will be much more dependent on how much Cameron and the pro-Europe camp will be shrewd and convincing in showing to the British people the real advantages that UK has always got from Europe. That is the key issue.
Because there's quite a lot of Italian business. If we look at it financially, there's something like 1,000 Italian subsidiaries present in that city of London. Do you think they would pull out if the UK decided to leave the EU, or is that scaremongering?
Well, I mean, it is not, it's not up to me to say what the private companies will do. It is clear that the city itself and London has hugely benefit from the fact that they are in the most important market in the world. And it is clear that if you leave, you leave. If you're out, you're out. And so that certainly would go against the interest of London. That I'm sure.
Now, at the start, David Cameron wanted to stop paying in-work benefits to non-UK workers from the rest of the EU. He didn't get that. He was offered an emergency break. But do you still think that's not interfering slightly with this idea of free movement of workers across the EU?
In this case, really, devil is in detail. We are just in the midst of also, evaluating all the several aspects. It is clear that for us the free movement of people in the Union and the free movement of workers is a fundamental principle. It is clear also that we have to analyze legally and technically what are the possible measures to avoid abuses to the access to the social protection, social benefit, which are particularly generous compared to other countries in UK.
Okay, so it can be an understandable request in that sense.
Provided the certain conditions are met, and provided that it is the European Commission which is there to ensure the general interest to evaluate the situation, yes.
And of course the other big question was this balance between Eurozone countries and non-Eurozone countries. How do you think that works? I mean, it's true that the majority, 19 out of the 28 EU member states, are part of the Eurozone. Do you think that that interferes somewhat, that there could be legislation passed that would jeopardise or discriminate against non-Eurozone countries?
There might be a theoretical risk that we are avoiding through this agreement. It is clear that the Eurozone must be improved, must be deepened, and it is essential for us to deepen the integration of the Eurozone, and it is also essential for us not to accept any veto from those who have chosen to stay outside. Then there are some aspects which must be effective for the 28 member states, banking supervision, financial regulations, and also on that we have to find the right balance, but also, I mean, this aspect is an aspect that, I mean, can be dealt with effectively.
But we can, in the EU, we can continue with almost two separate things, the Eurozone that can get tighter and tighter and still be part of this broader EU.
I do believe that that is the future of the union. I mean, the euro is not a union is not a multi-currency union. The euro is the currency of the European Union, and then there are certain countries who has negotiated to stay out. I think that the future is a stronger and we hope economic, social, and also political integration, at least of the Eurozone. And it is clear that this must be go hand in hand with the flexibility required to living together in a Europe which is organized around a deepened Eurozone and a wider single market. That, in my view, is the way forward.
It sounds like a possible way forward in any case, if not a delicate balance nonetheless. Mr. Gozi, thank you so much for your time and joining us here on Talking Europe. That brings us to the end of this week's show. Do take care and see you again next time.